Okay, I'd like to call the Community Services Subcommittee meeting to order. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Item 3.1 is a delegation by the Stratford Basketball Association, and there's a motion that the delegation of Tim Doherty on behalf of the Stratford Basketball Association be heard. Moved by Councillor Burbach. Any discussion? Councillor Anderson, did you have a discussion?
No, I was just going to vote, sorry.
All right, thank you. Okay, all in favor? All right, that's carried. Mr. Doherty, may go ahead when you're ready.
So through the chair, we are just working to connect Mr. Doherty right now.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Doherty, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for meeting with me today. I appreciate your time. As mentioned, my name is Tim Doherty and I'm the president of the Stratford Basketball Association. Today, I will be asking for additional court time at the Stratford Agriplex that meets the needs of approximately 450 young people who love the game of basketball. In the short term, we were asking for the use of all 4 courts for one entire night between Monday and Thursday to run our house league program, as well as suitable time to hold practices for our travel teams. In the longer term, we feel it would be beneficial to do a thorough review of the allocation and access to court time at the Agriplex. I'll support my argument by focusing on 3 issues in particular. 1, equity of access. Our second point would be resource use and efficiency. And the third would be what I think we all would share an importance in, the priority for youth. So in previous years, the Stratford Basketball Association has made extensive use of both secondary and elementary schools under the community use program to run our house league and travel programs. At the present time, we have been unable to secure gym time in any of our schools, and we're not sure when we will be able to get gym time in the schools. Being a former educator, I was anticipating this being a problem all summer, and I tried to work with the city and other user groups to come up with suitable court times for us to run our programs. Currently, we have been unable to come up with what we believe is a viable option. I will say at this point that through the efforts of the staff, we have been offered some additional court time on Friday night. After surveying family and board members, we've come to the conclusion that this simply is not suitable for our program. Busy families are tired after a full week. Running their children to other various activities leaves Friday night a time when we just want to rest, relax, and is not really desirable, especially for house league basketball. We feel we'd lose numbers from our house league program if we ran it on Friday evenings. I want to also point out, even with this additional gym time on Friday evenings, we would not have enough gym time to run our programs. It would allow us to run some, but not all programs. As far as equity of access, one only needs to take a look at the handout that I provided prior to my presentation to this subcommittee. Looking at exact court hours can become complicated, but I don't believe it takes a very in-depth look to see that a couple of user groups have a disproportionate amount of time in the Agriplex, while other groups get very little, or maybe I could say the scraps after the other 2 groups have their time. Using the method that staff has divided up the gym, I've come up to calculations which would indicate that badminton gets 46.5 hours a week, volleyball 35, soccer 11.5, and basketball only 9.5. I think we can see the gap there that's fairly significant. In addition to that, if you could look at that handout I provided, you can see that Saturdays are set aside for tournaments. Basketball has been told we can have 2 Saturdays out of the entire year. The rest of the Saturdays are allocated to volleyball and badminton, who I would suggest already receive a disproportionate amount of time. As well, we will be asked to give up 5 Sundays of time so badminton and volleyball can run their tournaments, which extend over 2 days. I might add, we were not given the opportunity to run tournaments over 2 days as a basketball program, where it appears volleyball and badminton are permitted to do that. We do understand and acknowledge that there have been some historical factors that have contributed to this allocation of court time. Our question is, how long will the city continue with a process that clearly favors some user groups over the others? Basketball is one of the fastest growing sports in Canada. We've seen that here in Stratford in its growth. Basketball is very easily accessible because of the low cost for equipment, and it appeals to a group of young people that maybe some of the other sports don't appeal to. And we have been told that there's a contract in place until 2023, and there's reluctance to change the terms of the contract. To that point, I would remind you that last year during COVID, the contracts were changed and time was reallocated to various groups. Well, COVID's still here. We're still dealing with COVID. We're still limited having access to our full resources. And if we were able to break the contract and reallocate last year due to COVID, I'm respectfully suggesting we can do the same again this year, because unlike Alberta, I don't think we in Ontario are telling people that COVID is over. As far as resource use and efficiency, I would suggest our program puts more users on the court during a given time period than some of the other user groups. I would also suggest there are times when there are very few people using the Agriplex. And I say this with confidence because on Wednesday nights, I am at the Agriplex as I have been convening one of the House League divisions there for a couple of years. I can confidently say the other side of the net, there are very few participants. And as the evening goes on, it reduces to next to nobody on that side of the net. I say that with complete confidence. Both volleyball and badminton have one weekday night where they have full access to the entire complex to run their programs. We're asking to be given the same consideration where we can have access to the entire complex for one night. As mentioned previously, Friday is not really a suitable option for that. Stratford Basketball Association is made up entirely of youth between the ages of 9 and 19. We've all faced adversity and difficult times and disappointment in the last 18 months due to COVID. Most would agree that elderly and youth have been disproportionately affected by COVID. We hear many stories and studies of the impact of our young people's mental health because of their inability to access outside programs, recreation, and get together with friends. As we slowly move to a more normal life, it's our hope that there is a priority from youth and that this priority on youth is reflected in the allocation of court time at the Agriplex. At the beginning of my presentation, I mentioned we're asking for a couple of specific things. Our preferred option is the entire use of the Agriplex, all 4 courts on Wednesday night, which we feel confidently would be enough to run our House League program. We also would need approximately 15 hours of court time to run our travel program. If Wednesday night is not a possibility, is it possible to have access Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday to the entire complex? If we were to have one of those other nights, we would also continue to need 15 hours a week for court time for our travel programs. I believe this is a very small ask, given the circumstances we find ourselves in. I want to remind you of what I said earlier in the program or in my presentation. Traditionally, we have used the school gyms. We don't know when or if we're going to get access to the school gyms, just like last year. Excuse me, just like last year. I can promise you and make a commitment, if you allocate us additional gym time and we happen to get access to the schools, we'll give it all back. We just need court time in the event that we do not have gym time in the schools. I know the schools are working that, but I think they all have bigger priorities than dealing with outside user groups right now. We have been in conversation with both the Avon-Maitland Board and here in Perth Catholic. We and they just simply don't know when they will be able to give us access to gyms. As I said, we didn't have access to gyms last year. We were able to get some court time at the Agriplex. We're asking for the same again this year. During COVID, we've all had to sacrifice and give up things. I am asking that city staff gather the user groups around the table to have a frank and honest discussion about what they need, not want, but what they need for court time to run their programs. I think it's fair to ask groups like Badminton, do you need to play 3 or 4 times a week, or could you play once or twice a week? I think we need to ask volleyball, you need to have 3 to 4 hours of practice time for your travel teams, or could 1 or 2 hours of practice time work? And the benefit of that would be there would be gym time opened up so that basketball could too, excuse me, to run their programs and offer a recreational experience to our young people. As I said a couple of times, if the city will allow us to have full access 1 weeknight and 15 hours of gym time, we can run our program in a scaled down version. If and when we get school times, we're happy to give it back. I think either through direction of this committee or working with city staff and users to talk about needs versus wants, we can come up with a solution so that everybody can win a little bit and run their programs. I'm hoping to hear positive news from this committee to report back to parents and families, my board, as we're busy trying to plan our upcoming season, and court time is a crucial factor for us in determining what type of program we can offer. At this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have for me.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Are there any questions, Councillor Henderson?
I was just wondering, I see on your chart that there is open time during the day. I'm wondering, because of the situation with COVID and that, if the school could coordinate to, you know, when their gym time is, to be able to get them over to the egg complex during the day and back. Maybe they could put 2 courses back to back, or I mean, probably too late this season. They probably already got the class, well, the classes will be all set up, right? Because I see we've already had an issue with soccer. Somehow they got bumped off their Friday night, and that looks like the only time they really had, except for the tournaments on the Sunday. And that's got to be addressed still.
The school option isn't really workable. Class schedules have been made.
Okay.
And our participants attend a wide variety of different schools. It's not just our high school students who are fairly close at Stratford Secondary School in St. Michael. We also have students from, excuse me, all the elementary schools in Stratford as well. And it would be problematic to get there during the day. And I believe badminton and pickleball makes extensive use of the facility during the day as it is.
I'm just curious, we're allowed to have our facility open. Why aren't the schools allowed to? Because I thought you were allowed a certain amount of group per room.
Once again, I'm only talking from my past experience as an educator. I think it's fair to say right now, schools have bigger priorities than opening up their facilities to outside groups, trying to get off to a safe and healthy start. They have said they will be happy to work with us in the future. They just don't know when that is.
That's very interesting because, you know, children being exercised and health and well-being is very important too, especially with COVID and what all they've been through, the emotional trauma. But well, I guess you can only do what you can do. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, I was going to ask along what Councillor Henderson was talking about with COVID going right now, and Kim, you're talking about like traveling teams and under 12 aren't vaccinated. Isn't there a potential problem like inside with what the plans you're talking about right now with the fourth wave?
Yes, there are certainly some concerns with traveling at that young age. We would be following recommendations from both the Perth County Health Unit as well as Basketball Ontario, who will be setting up guidelines for that. I know various other sports like hockey and ringette they're facing the same challenges as far as traveling at younger age groups. Hopefully, vaccines for younger age groups will be improved at some time, you know, late fall, early winter, but certainly, Councillor Clifford, that is a concern that we have, and we would work very closely with the health unit, the city and Basketball Ontario to make sure that those situations can happen as safely as possible. I would add, as far as safety is concerned, on Wednesday nights, currently we have half the facility and Badminton is the other half. It seems to me it'd be safer if one group had the whole facility for one night for contract tracing purposes and safety rather than splitting it up between two groups.
Okay, are there any other questions for Mr. Doherty? Councillor Verbeck?
Thank you. Yeah, my question actually isn't for Mr. Doherty. It's for the clerk, I guess, or somebody. I wasn't quite sure if we would want to further have discussion about this. I see it's not listed as an item further along. So is this the time to have a discussion about this and ask staff questions, or sorry?
No, through the chair, great question. Right now, if there are any further questions for Tim Doherty, we would ask that they be raised. If not, then we'll proceed to mute him. And then certainly you can have a discussion on any action or direction you'd like to request from staff. If the intent is to refer this to staff for review and a report, we would be looking for that through a motion.
Thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions for Mr. Doherty? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Doherty.
Okay, thank you for your time. And as I said, I look forward to hearing a positive response so that we can get our basketball program going. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is there any discussion regarding Mr. Doherty's delegation? Councillor Verbeck?
Thank you. Yes, I would like to make a motion that we have staff create a report. I think Mr. Doherty's point is well taken that it is still COVID. So even though we do have contracts with these groups, we do need to make consideration because they are unable to use the normal facilities. So I think at least as a temporary measure, I would like to see staff reach out, as Mr. Doherty suggested, to the various groups and see if a plan can be created for this year specifically, or this season specifically, until we come out the other end of COVID.
Okay, so a motion is on the floor. Are there any comments or discussion regarding the motion? Councillor Clifford?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, obviously we've heard from Tony Hunter about the soccer, and what I see here happening, as soon as we start to change any of it, we're going to have response from all of them. So I'm asking staff, have they already discussed this? And is it a possibility? Is there some compromise? I'd like to ask staff that if that's okay at this time.
Through the chair, I can respond. I did meet with Badminton last week to discuss the Wednesday night and if they were willing to give it up. And I think Mr. Doherty did the same. And they were unwilling to give up Wednesday night, but we're willing to give up a Friday. That's how we accommodated that Friday night time. And the decision to change soccer's time was based on the need for youth recreation.
Okay, thank you. Is there any, Councillor Anderson?
Sorry, Dave, you cut out that last sentence. You changed the soccer because why?
We feel it's more important for youth recreation as opposed to an adult league.
So why, when soccer only really had the one time, why wasn't badminton or volleyball looked at that way instead? And I thought I heard Mr. Doherty say that Friday night really wasn't working out for them.
Yep, and yeah, you did hear that, and we heard the same. But we do have contracts with basketball, volleyball, and badminton that allocate that time, and I certainly agree that they're old. They stem from Kiwanis Community Center times, and there's certainly, and I would agree that there needs to be some change. And I believe what you'll hear from us in the report that you're requesting is the suggestion that we develop an allocation policy.
Well, and what I'm remembering back is when, I can't think of his name, the guy that does the, not the Pork Congress. Remember, he wanted to bring in the Dairy Expo guy, and he wanted to do something in the fall. And we heard back from all those committees quite strongly on how they need those times, and a lot of them need those practices because they're going to tournaments and that. And I realize this is COVID and it's different circumstances, but we did have a report already from them on how they use that. And I guess I'm just really not understanding soccer being bumped out when it sounded like they had a contract when they have hardly any hours. And that's lots of youth getting exercise. And, you know, we have no other place that soccer can play indoors at this time, you know, unless the soccer association builds something. But
so through the chair, the three groups that I mentioned, badminton, volleyball, and basketball, are actually under an agreement with us, a 5-year agreement, which ends, I believe, in April of 23. Soccer, on the other hand, has a permit with us that is renewed yearly. Yes, they have used that time in the past, and it has been an adult group. And if I could repeat myself, I would say that having youth recreation fits our program.
Councillor Burbank?
Thank you. Yes, I look forward to seeing the report, actually. And I'm curious as to how last year we were able to kind of get everybody working together and sharing the time because of COVID, but this year that seems to have disappeared. I just find that a little mystifying. Hopefully, if we could get groups around a table or even an electronic table to have a discussion, maybe that might facilitate some more cooperation. I don't know. I hope that would be the case.
Well, if that's the movement of the subcommittee and the council makes that recommendation, we'll certainly follow up.
Are there any other comments or discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? It's unanimous. It's carried. Councillor Burbank?
Thank you. Yeah, I just had, following that, I actually have another motion that I would like to make. Because as I was thinking about the use of facilities and so on, and policies and fairness. I was wondering what kind of policies that we had in place in community services. And I did come across a strategic master plan for leisure services and facilities report, which is actually from 2005. So this is a community services master plan report that was good for 2006 to 2018. So the plan has expired. And I think it would be worth our while to have a look, especially since the contracts are coming up, to be looking at creating another strategic master plan for recreation. So we could look through all of our facilities. We could see, do we have enough space for the sports demands? What is the demand? Possibly creating a capacity model, looking at the condition of existing facilities. The old plan talks about the importance of providing a balanced mix of different leisure activities, emphasizing how important it is for youth and seniors to be able to have recreational activities, provision of fair and equitable opportunities that encourage participation. So I think there was a lot of good things in that old plan, but I really do think we need to have an update. So I will be making the motion that we look at creating a strategic master plan for recreational services and possibly referring it to the 2022 budget.
Okay, I'll just ask Mr. Poe, is that motion clear?
Through the chair, yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. So there's a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion? Councilor Clifford?
Yeah, even though we heard that high schools aren't involved right now, I believe when we're talking about a plan, we have to believe that high school facilities are going to open back up again. So I hope it's part of our plan ahead that high schools would also be included in that, because they're all public buildings that are paid by the taxpayer.
Councilor Burbank?
Thanks. Yeah, I forgot to mention too that the old report did mention the sports tourism plan, and I know that we've discussed that before. So this would also segue nicely or overlap nicely into that work, as well as the plan that we're looking at as far as marketing opportunities. So all of these things can somewhat overlap. If we do feel that we need facilities, and we know capital costs are huge, maybe there's some partnerships that we can look at for creating more facilities if they're necessary. So a type of study that like this would look at demand and the data first, and then make a plan around how we can use existing facilities and also whether we need more. So I think it's a good opportunity to plan ahead.
Councilor Henderson?
I know we're using the Rotary Complex for a lot of things, but we did have the advanced voting there, and there was some rooms that were open. Is there a possibility that there is something that's at the Egg Complex that could be moved to the Rotary Complex temporary? Like, I don't know whether badminton or soccer or something that could be used in those rooms temporary. I know we tried roller skating up there and it worked. It didn't wreck the floors or anything. So I'm wondering, say temporary during the COVID situation, is it a possibility that we could use some of those rooms for that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Through the chair, we are currently using the halls or 3 halls for the election. But we do have a commitment to public health to have that facility available for vaccination clinics. And yes, the vaccination clinics have deteriorated or not as many of them. There are still some dates booked that bring us into at least November. The 4th hall is is used as the testing center, and we do have an agreement with them that I believe also goes into November.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? We do have a motion on the floor. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so item 3.2 is a delegation by Stratford Pickleball Association, and there's a recommendation that Doug Diplock and Murray Patterson on behalf of the Stratford Pickleball Association and Stratford Minor Sports be heard. Councillor Clifford moving, all in favor? It's carried. Mr. Dunlop, when you're ready.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the chair and committee members for accepting our delegation. I'm going to try and be as brief as possible. I know that Murray has to leave for another commitment at 4:15, and you may have some questions for him. Now, I did provide a handout to everybody, and I'm sure you've had the opportunity to read it and digest it. And I imagine most of the questions will come from that. I'm not going to go into the history of pickleball. I'm sure that you all know the history of pickleball. And I'm going to go quickly on. And what we are asking for is basically in 3 phases. And what we should try and deal with right today is phase 1. And what we're asking for is the development of a youth program on city-operated courts that we can teach the young of Stratford in the area the sport of pickleball. Now, we were approached by Stratford Minor Sports Council back in May to try and initiate something, and that's when we started to look into it and made the request to do that. We examined different areas. We examined Cirque, we examined Shakespeare. We found both of those courts to be wanting. They're not up to standard, and Shakespeare itself it's all built wrong, and it's just not usable. And I can go into the results or the why it's not usable at any time. But I think the important thing right now is, do we want to provide the youth of Stratford with the opportunity to play pickleball? If we don't want to provide it, then it's all a moot point. But if we do want to provide it, and I think it's something that I personally have been asked for by people who have contacted me through our website, that Stratford Minor Sports has been contacted and they've asked for it, and this is why we're bringing it forward. And you'll be happy to know that at this point, we're not asking for any allocated time inside. We know you're busy. I've heard the last presentation. I can see that you're busy. What we're asking for is use outside. And use outside, and it has been noted that the courts are designated as first come, first served, and that it would change that whole idea if times were relegated to youth pickleball. Well, what we're asking for is 2 to 3 days a week, 2 hours a day during the summer months to be used on pickleball courts that, for the most part, remain empty. And they're tennis courts that have been adapted to pickleball courts, or pickleball courts that aren't really operating properly anyway. The changes, it's been noted that there would be a financial cost to the city for the changes. Yes, that is true. And it would be approximately $15,000. And I think that the city has been aware of that. And if it's thought that this has to go back to staff for more study, the only one thing I would ask is that the study be completed in a timely fashion, that if council recommends that we do have a youth program, that money can be allocated in the budget and not have to wait until next year to try and go through the whole thing again. The phase 1, as I said, is the opening up of the youth program. And Murray Patterson, who, if he's available, he might be able to speak to what the Stratford Youth Council is able to give us on the background of that. Murray, are you available? It appears that Murray's not available, so I'm going to try and fill in as best I can. What needs to be done on Shakespeare is resurfacing of the courts. They're plastic, a plastic coating on them that doesn't work. The courts are the wrong size. The courts are, they put in 4 nets that are called pickleball nets. They're at the wrong height. They're at 35 and 36 inches instead of 34 inches. The courts are placed back to back with no barrier in between them, so that 2 of them would be unusable by anybody at any time. There's a portion of pickleball that's played on the non-volley zone, and that's a very important section. The way that those courts are built, one of the non-volley zones should be 7 feet. One is 6'5" the other one is 6'11.5" and the center net is placed closer to one end than the other end. If you compare it to hockey, it's like building a hockey rink and putting center ice on place and then making one net smaller than the other and asking people to play on that and asking us to teach youth to play a sport on a field that's not properly made. As I said before, the important thing that we have to consider is, do we want to bring in a youth program? There has been, as I said, emails to me. There's been contact to Stratford Minor Sports. And we feel that there's a need. We're willing to do that. There was no cost to the city other than upgrading of the facilities.
Hi, Doug, it's Murray. Am I still muted?
Yes, you are.
I can hear you, Mr. Patterson. Go ahead.
So sorry to interrupt, but for whatever reason, I couldn't get unmuted. Just quickly from the Stratford Minor Sports Council, a Cole's Note version here. Obviously, I was approached, I'm going to say the end of 2019, asking from a parent if there was a youth pickleball in Stratford. I said, no, there isn't. And at the time, COVID hadn't set in, so I was preparing for our annual banquet in 2020. COVID set in, and we all know what has gone on since then. Now that things have started to open up, dealing with other things, I spent some time and I tried to find out who the adult users of pickleball groups were, just so I wouldn't have to do all the legwork on a youth program. So I approached, I believe it was, Dave Ashkenese, and then he put me in touch with Doug's group. And I asked them about running, if they thought they would expand into a youth program. And I likened it to the way we do badminton as part of Minor Sports Council. In all honesty, it's an adult group with a youth program. I saw pickleball running similar to that. Now that things have, but of course, and being involved with Minor Sports Council as a president, I for sure knew there's no indoor time at the Agplex due to the other sports, and in talks with Tim Doherty trying to get youth basketball more time in there. The thought was maybe we could just start this program with the help of this existing pickleball association outside until a time came that we could figure out whether we get inside at schools, which again right now is a bit of a pain for the obvious reason. So that's where the youth side of this pickleball has come from. It's been was people contacting me as president of Minor Sports Council, and I thought, yeah, well, why not? It's it would be a low cost cheap. They all have a pair of running shoes, And I believe the Lions Club was willing to come on board and give kids or buy rackets so they could at least try it. And then we could, and selfishly, then I get a 13th member of Minor Sports Council. I can increase the number of sports on our Minor Sports Council. So that's where I'm at with this. There's an association that was already present. I have enough on my plate with all the other sports, and I thought if I could convince Doug and his group to expand to a youth program, I've already got built-in teachers or possibly coaches for these kids. So that's where it all came from. And now all this other, I don't know enough about the courts or anything like that. That's where Doug and these guys, they can go and they do all their measuring or whatever. I'm just looking at it from the youth side to try getting a program started in Stratford. We probably won't get anything going over this winter unless we can get into a school or I don't know, a facility to try something over the winter. It would be more for the spring when we could be outside. So that's sort of my Cole's Note version of this. Unfortunately, I have another commitment that I have to leave to go to. I can probably hang around for another 5 minutes if need be. Hello?
Hello, yeah,
Are there any
Fine.
questions for Mr. DePluck or Mr. Patterson?
I do have a few more things I'd like to add, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Through the chair, in addition to our members being willing to instruct and to give of their time, we have, as Marie said, the Lions Club who's willing to donate at least $1,000 towards the program. We have a pickleball paddle manufacturer in St. Mary's who's willing to donate paddles to support the program. We have pickleball group, one of the pickleball groups I belong to, has been asked to give instruction at the high school for 2 lessons a day for the next week. So there is a lot of interest in it. I have, again, personally been contacted to try and provide some lessons to people individually so that their kids can play. So the essence of what I'm asking you is that, will you support youth pickleball? And if you will support youth pickleball, will you try and create, or there's no try, will you create proper facilities for the youth to play in? And will adults benefit from it? Yes, of course they will. But and to make 4 proper pickleball courts that are existing on Shakespeare but are not usable is the first step. And if that works, and as I said, if we can show that it works and that there is a demand, will we come back and ask for more? Yes, we will. I'm not going to pretend that that's all that we want. That's all that we want if that is sufficient. But that's, so I ask you to consider those things, and if it is referred back, please have an answer soon so that if there are financial concerns for the city, that they can plan for them for this coming budget. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, please.
Thank you. Are there any questions, Councillor Clifford?
I actually have a question of staff. I've heard about this plastic covering at Shakespeare. Was that intended for pickleball, or was that plastic for tennis? Or someone explain about the plastic that's there right now?
Through the chair, the plastic that you're referring to is referred to as an all-sport court. I guess we were unaware that it wouldn't suit pickleball. although the tennis portion seems to be okay. And if I could speak to their phase one at the same time, is that what they're requesting in phase one is relatively small in cost. It's certainly something that we can include in our operational budgets for 2022. As for the courts being not correct, we certainly were informed by Pickleball that that's the case. And we have made several attempts to contact the company with no success.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions for either of our presenters? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. DeFlock and Mr. Patterson.
Thank you, sir. To the chair, thank you, councilors and the chair.
So item 4.1, there's a staff recommendation. Do I have any discussion regarding that the council refer the youth initiative request from the Pickleball Association to staff for further review? Councillor Clifford, are you moving that? Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? All in favor? Sorry, I'll ask again. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. So item 5 is a report of the city clerk. Ms. Defoe, did you want to speak to item 5?
Through the chair, certainly. So the purpose of the report is to seek authorization to amend the terms of reference for the Communities in Bloom Advisory Committee. And the amendment would be to reduce the number of citizen representative positions from 8 to 6. As outlined in the report, the city has not been successful at recruiting for the vacant citizen representative position from 2020. And then since then, we've also received 2 additional citizen representative resignations. In order to ensure a quorum for the monthly meetings, staff recommend amending the terms of reference and then re-advertising for the remaining vacant position, along with the current terms that are expiring. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Defoe. Are there any questions, or would anyone like to move the staff recommendation? Councillor Burback, you'll move that. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Great, that's unanimous. Thank you. Item 6 is a report of the supervisor of transit, an update on Saturday on-demand transit. I'll pass that over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Through the chair, I just wanted to give a quick update on how our progress is going with the Saturday on demand. Definitely since July, when we started going through the province's reopening plan, we've seen a definite uptake in ridership requests for on demand, as well as those users who are starting to learn our progresses. So we were at 700 individuals. Now we're currently, I apologize, now we're currently at 725 people who have registered for on-demand services. We are continuing to see good progress in our services, both on-time pickups. We are averaging about 8 minutes from the point of booking to the point where we arrive for the rider. And our average ride time is consistent still between 12 and 16 minutes for the ride time. We have, with the information that I provided, we have heat maps now, which we can see where our most recognized and most used locations are, as far as where people are looking to go in the city. So with that, we introduced a fixed route, which is from our west end to our east end. It runs on a 20-minute service, and that is starting to gain some traction. But as word gets out there, we're continuing to see a more uptake. So that's kind of where we're at right now with the Saturday on-demand service. It is going very well. We continue to answer phone calls for those who aren't able to use their home PC or their phones or tablets. So we're definitely seeing good progress there.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Clifford?
Yeah, I was just going to ask about complaints. Are you having complaints? Like the report sounds great, but what kind of complaints are you having, or if you are having any?
So through the chair, as with everything new, yes, we do get some complaints, but in all sincerity, we don't get very many of them. I do take calls on the weekends as well as throughout the week. And they are, the issues that have been brought up are transit time, how long that they're on these buses for. But with the information that we have, we are able to troubleshoot those. We've had, instances where we've had phones that have gone down, whether from our connection issues. Those have been kind of the times where we see the most complaints is when they can't reach us. But we have things in place now that to prevent those sorts of things from happening. They're forwarded to my cell phone or the manager of transit's cell phone, just for us to be able to keep in close contact with these people in the event that they cannot reach the regular lines.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, there is a staff recommendation that the report be received for information. Councillor Henderson, any discussion? All right, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item 7.1 is an ad hoc transit committee update. Mr. Mosley, go ahead, please.
Yes, through the chair, I've created an update that's before you now as far as the term of the ad hoc transit committee, which started roughly 2 years ago. We're almost, actually we have one more meeting left for this term, which is actually next week. And basically I just did a brief summary as far as it's as far as attendance, how many meetings were held. We started out fairly strong when it was in person. Then it got, we had to go electronic once we figured out how to go electronic, and we were doing meetings electronically. Towards the end, the last several meetings, we've had difficulty achieving quorum, only because people couldn't make it, or there were one or two that had some technology issues to actually get into a meeting. But for the most part, we started off, and I listed them, some of the topics that were discussed early on were in actual fact topics on my radar anyway, whether it was real-time app, whether it was updating fleet, updating technology, accessible bus shelters. These were the topics that were pretty much brought up right up in the beginning, which I explained to the to committee members that these were projects through the ISIP funding stream that I was already investigating, or they were being implemented, or we were already at some point percentage-wise through these projects. Pretty much beyond that, from my point of view, it was pretty much just updates on all these projects, and there was a lot of projects. Just to give people kind of a report card as far as where we're at, how new technology was working, give them updates as far as where my thoughts were for bus shelters and accessible bus pads. So as we went along, it got to be more about updates from me and maybe not so much agenda items. And so that's the main reason for my recommendation is I think because daily we deal with the public with whatever issues might come up either through email, we always respond. We're always talking to the public all the time, either electronically or even on the buses or at the platform. We're pretty much staff is the face of transit, and they know who we are. So if anyone have ever had wanted to make a comment, they definitely know how to get a hold of us and have in the past. And the reason for my recommendation is not because we don't want to hear from the public, because we do all the time, but I'm just thinking things like updates, which is what I generally do because I am implementing a lot of projects. It just, I think at the start of a subcommittee level, I think it will reach a wider audience as well, so that a lot more people will know kind of what's going on in the department, for those that use the service and those that are just interested in transit.
All right, Councillor Henderson.
I wonder if we could defer this by 1 month, because transit has a meeting on September 1st, and I'd be interested in hearing what the people on the transit committee have to say. We've really struggled since COVID to have meetings. Some aren't able to do Zoom, and also we've discovered recently that some of the times weren't working out because people work to say 1:30 or something, right? And I'd be interested in hearing what they have to say. And I agree with Mike, like we get great reports coming in under community services, you know, what Transit's been up to and what they're doing. And but the volunteer committees on there are very strongly for transit and trying to improve it. So I'd be interested in hearing what they have to say. I mean, maybe it can go forward still today because it still has to go to council committee and council and everything, but I just hate for it to come forward like this before they actually hear about it. I worry about that.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. If possible, I don't know if you were making a deferral motion, but we do have, if we could just have our questions with Mr. Mosley, and then we'll move on to the motions, if that's okay with you. Great. Are there any other questions for Mr. Mosley? Councillor Burbeck?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just thinking about other ways that we've communicated with or got input from the public in the past. Was there 1 day a year where we had sort of an open house where people would come and discuss? Is that, am I correct remembering that?
Through the chair, actually, there is a type of form that we do annually. It's through the AODA regulations. So it's a meeting solely based on accessibility. It's kind of a report card. Really not necessarily a format to talk about everything else transit necessarily. It's more geared to accessibility, whether it's the type of vehicles we use, whether it's accessible bus stops, in the improvements there. It also covers the mobility bus and as far as how that operates. So that's legislative that we have to do annually, which actually I will be doing on November 17th again of this year to provide updates. It's not necessarily a forum for anything transit. It's more geared to accessibility and the reporting of milestones, what we've done for the year.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. I'm just wondering, would it be valuable to perhaps do that as well, even though it's not required, that we could do that for transit, where there would be a time where people could give their input or come and have a discussion about things, either in person or perhaps even just doing a survey every so often, where people feel like they can give their feedback, even if they don't have complaints. Maybe we want to hear their positive feedback as well, of things they like. So having some sort of opportunity for people to give their input, whether positive or negative, might be something to consider. But I do understand why the ad hoc committee is probably seemingly at the end of its life here. But yeah, maybe we can consider something that's more of an annual reach out to the public.
Yeah, through the chair, absolutely, and we've done that in the past, whether it's public, open houses for the new terminal, as far as the design feature. We did that for when I changed the routes a few years back and added the number 7 industrial. I know we were at the malls, we did a couple open houses like that, so I would not be absolutely could we do, you know, something like that annually, just as an open house for an evening or something. Yeah.
Councillor Clifford?
Yeah, I was just going to add what the manager of transit was talking about. In the past, I used to get a lot of calls as a counselor, but the last term and term before, I hardly get any calls. So I believe the complaints or questions are being answered right now. Where in the past, I don't know why, but it was a problem, quite frankly, because I used to get a lot of calls, but right now I don't get any.
Yes, through the chair, we make a point of being responsive as quickly as possible. Like I said, either through email. I talk to people at Market Square behind City Hall. Nathaniel, a supervisor, he'll talk to our customers at the platform. We're always visible, and we always try to answer as quick as possible. Might not be in minutes, but it's, you know, we try to answer anything that might come in, especially electronically or on a phone, like within a day. So it's we feel it's important that especially when we make decisions on certain things, that we're front and center as far as, you know, answering questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mosley. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Mosley. We do have a recommendation that the management report be received for information. Maybe I'll take that one separately. Just be submitted to receive the report. Councilor Burbeck, will move that. I'll call the question. All in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you. We do have another recommendation that the ad hoc transit committee be disbanded. Do I have a discussion or a mover for that motion? Councilor Henderson, do you have are you moving that?
I'd like to refer that to next month, please. I know it runs out the end of this month, but.
Thank you. And could I have clarification, Mr. Foe? Is there discussion on a referral motion, or is there no discussion?
So through the chair, there is no discussion on a referral. If the intent is to defer it to the October Community Services Subcommittee meeting, there can be discussion only on the length of the deferral.
Great, thank you. So there is a motion to defer until the October Community Services meeting. I'll call the question. All in favor? Great, that's carried. Thank you. Item number 8 is a department update from the director.
Chair, the report is in front of you, and I only have one thing to add. It's about capital in reviewing our capital program for 2021. We'll find that most of the projects are complete, or at least the equipment and transit has been ordered. There's only one exception, and that is the scissor lift in facilities. And it appears that we haven't budgeted enough money. And so we would prefer to carry that forward, and in the 2022 budget, add more funds to that budget. And that's all I have to add towards further to the report.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for the director? Seeing none, item 9 is advisory committee outside board minutes. There are none at this time. And item 10, the next subcommittee meeting is October 14th at 3:30. Councilor Burbeck.
I apologize. Something popped into my head about the very first item that we talked about, and I really wanted to mention it. So I apologize in advance. Like we were talking about having existing contracts with badminton and other groups. Would the pandemic not be sort of a force majeure kind of moment where those contracts can be altered? So just as far as terminology or legality goes, I would think a pandemic would allow you to go that direction. So that was one thought. And then the pickleball courts, outdoor use, we have a policy of not booking. So that would be another thing for the strategic master plan to look at our policy around outdoor facility use as well, and the possibility of being able to book those spots. So thank you for indulging me.
Great, thank you. And maybe those could be added to the referrals to staff where appropriate.
If I could just chime in for a second.
Yep.
I think in terms of the agreements, that we'll get a legal opinion on whether COVID trumps the agreement. And as for booking pickleball courts, that's not uncommon to at least put a sign up and say that these courts are booked between 3 and 5 for a specific event. And I think we already believe we do that at the volleyball courts. Sign that people know that in that way, people are informed that these courts have been closed for those 2 hours.
Great, thank you. Are there any other comments for adjournment? Seeing none. Great, I'll call for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Henderson, all in favor? That's carried.